Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The sound of metal on concrete. It was the 600 bell at the ammunition supply point. Not a cheerful ring, but a sharp, cutting chime of heavy steel slamming against unforgiving flooring. It echoed in the cavernous, cold warehouse bay. 30 soldiers stood rigid in the pre-dawn silence. 30 faces, frozen in the familiar discomfort of expectation. And then came the boom. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brooks, a block of muscle and resentment, performed his daily violence. He slammed his clipboard down on the inspection table. A conscious, theatrical use of noise, designed to make the air ring with his authority. Everyone flinched. Every single man. Except, perhaps, the small figure already kneeling on the damp concrete floor. Brooks' voice boomed, thick with manufactured contempt. Incompetent quota hire. He directed the insult at Specialist Vanessa Thompson. She was the target. She was the reason for the daily spectacle. Barely 5'4", she seemed lost in the regulation camouflage. Her hair was pulled so tight in a regulation bun, it felt like a tiny anchor in the sudden, churning storm of the morning. Thompson was collecting scattered ammunition rounds. Not carelessly, not frantically, but with a meticulous, almost surgical method. One by one. Each bullet picked up with a precise, careful handling that belied the supposed incompetence. The tremor in her hands. It was from the cold, it had to be. The perpetual chill of the warehouse floor, the cold that seeped into the bones. Or maybe it was the constant, low-level anxiety. The tremor of a woman living under a microscope, waiting for the inevitable crack in her fabricated identity. 30 soldiers watched. The silence was profound. Uncomfortable. It was a ritual of quiet, collective humiliation. For 3 months, Brooks and his 2 lackeys had made it their mission to remind Thompson daily that she did not belong, that she was a liability, that she was the weakest link. Thompson carried a raw, constant inner conflict. The urgent need to endure, to maintain the disguise, the mask of the mediocre clerk, against the overwhelming physical urge to break the silence, to stand up, to scream the truth. But she didn't. She maintained the silence. She stood slowly, the collected rounds cradled in her hands, a small offering of obedience. She said no word. She walked deliberately to the inventory board, and she pinned something to it. A small, heavy piece of metal. It was a bronze explosive ordnance disposal badge. Scratched, worn, a survivor of something terrible. Etched onto its surface were 3 numbers, 723. The badge vibrated slightly under the stark, unforgiving fluorescent lights. A tiny, desperate pulse in the quiet room. Master Sergeant Elena Rivera, the armory chief, saw it. She was standing near the door, a woman whose face was weathered by decades of invisible weight and deployment sun. Rivera's coffee cup sloshed precariously. Her eyes narrowed, a sudden deep recognition. A shift in her entire demeanor. Memory, sharp and painful, was clearly striking her. Her fingers trembled as she slowly set her cup down. 723, she whispered. In the dead silence of the warehouse, the name of the unit sounded like a sudden, tearing scream. Brooks was too loud, too consumed by his own arrogance to notice. Can't even hold on to simple inventory, he sneered, oblivious to the badge now vibrating on the board. How's someone like you supposed to handle live ordnance? You're going to get someone killed with your incompetence. Thompson ignored him. She finished securing the small arms rounds. Her movements were still and unwavering. She turned to face him. A flicker in her brown eyes. It was not fear. It was not the predicted shame. It was something colder, harder. A profound, quiet sadness, coupled with a terrifying self-control. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Silence again. The mask stayed on. Private Jake Williams, barely 18 and new to the service, started to take an involuntary step forward. Thompson, without looking, gave a subtle, negative shake of her head. Brooks's accomplice, Rodriguez, cut Williams off with a barely audible, brutal threat. Williams backed down, but his gaze remained fixed on Thompson. He noticed the details. The way she moved, the way she unconsciously checked the blind corners of the room. The subtle habit of keeping her back to the wall. It was not the behavior of a supply clerk. It was the movement of a soldier always expecting contact. The anxiety was thick and heavy, clinging to her uniform like dust. She felt profoundly ignored, a deliberate ghost moving through a life that wasn't hers. The performance of incompetence was exhausting. "Thompson," Brooks announced, his voice dripping with triumphant authority. "You're on segregated ammunition duty today, Building 7, alone." It was punishment duty, the final stage of humiliation. Building 7, the desolate place for damaged, unstable, or classified rounds awaiting disposal. The stuff nobody wanted, the stuff that could kill you quietly. She nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement, nothing more. As she walked past, Rodriguez childishly stuck out his foot. A cheap, low move. Thompson didn't break her rhythm. She stepped over the outstretched boot. The movement was fluid, practiced, effortless. Her weight shifted, her center of gravity adjusted, all without a second's thought. Rivera noticed, Williams noticed. Even Chen, another of Brooks's followers, noticed the perfect, unthinking grace. Behind her, Brooks was already plotting his next, ultimate attack. But Rivera was no longer listening to him. She was already on the phone, her voice low, urgent, metallic. "Sir, it's Rivera. I need you to pull a file for me. Echo Oscar Delta Unit 723, special access only." Thompson walked alone toward Building 7. Her shadow was long in the early morning sun, stretching and fatting against the concrete. She carried a secret, a burden heavier than any live ordnance. And the moment to speak, the moment to reveal everything, had not yet arrived. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The moral reflection settled softly on her shoulders. Sometimes, the greatest strength is found in the stillness, in the choice to wait for the perfect moment to act, rather than the impulsive urge to react. The weight of deception was the price of survival. She would pay it for now. She stood alone, but what came next no one expected. Inside Building 7, the air was dead. The ventilation had failed long ago, leaving the space dusty, close, and stiflingly silent. It was the silence of a tomb. Thompson went to work. She moved crates, not with the strained effort of a supply clerk, but with the economical strength of a highly conditioned operative. Each crate placed precisely, each round assessed. The expertise was stunning. Had anyone been watching, they would have seen not an incompetent specialist, but a master craftsman. She wasn't just checking for disposal. She was verifying type, tracking origin, calculating potential hazard. Her hands, small, seemingly delicate, handled the live ordnance with the confident, familiar touch of someone who had done this tens of thousands of times. This was not labor. This was an innate, technical language she spoke fluently. Every action was a whispered word in that language. Within an hour she found it. The problem, the deliberate, deadly mistake. Mixed in with small arms ammunition, where they could easily be overlooked, were 340 grenades. They absolutely should not have been there. They were in distress. Thompson saw the telltale sign instantly. They were sweating. Tiny, almost imperceptible beads of moisture forming on the brass casing. Chemical breakdown, unstable. And worse, she knew the signature. White phosphorus. If they went critical, it would not be a conventional explosion. It would be an inferno, a fire that could not be put out with water. A fire that would reach thousands of degrees and consume the entire building. Thompson froze. A long, still moment stretched the silence. The fear was cold, sharp, and entirely professional. The feeling was one of profound, cold determination. She had a choice. She could report it immediately, follow protocol, call the EOD team from Fort Stewart. But that would expose her, raise all the questions she was not ready to answer. It would compromise the months of sacrifice. She chose silence again. She chose action over procedure. Immediate containment. Saving lives now was more important than protecting her fragile cover then. She isolated the rounds, proper deliberate spacing, a separate steel containment unit. She meticulously documented everything in her personal notebook. The small, fire-resistant one hidden in her cargo pocket. Every serial number, every minute detail of how these rounds ended up in the wrong place. The mistake was too precise to be an accident. It was intentional, a breadcrumb leading back to the original betrayal. 2 hours into her shift, the door opened. Rivera stood silhouetted against the bright outside light. Her face was impossible to read, a mosaic of suspicion, knowledge, and sudden respect. "Specialist Thompson," Rivera said, her voice formally modulated. "My office, now." They walked in silence, past the rumble of the motor pool, past the faint, distant smell of the dining facility. Rivera's office was small, crammed with the history of a long career. Every award was meticulously placed, a bronze star with V device, a purple heart. Rivera stood at her desk, staring at Thompson. The gaze was hard, unwavering, demanding the truth. "That badge," Rivera finally asked, her voice low, "where did you get it?" "A gift," Thompson said quietly, "from someone I knew, someone from Unit 723. The silence that followed was the only answer needed. Rivera turned her computer screen. A unit photograph, 5 years old, appeared on the display. Echo Oscar Delta Special Operations, Unit 723. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it was the best bomb disposal outfit the Army ever produced. They handled the impossible: chemical weapons, nuclear materials, high-risk, deep penetration missions. Thompson's jaw tightened. She felt the sudden, acute, familiar grip of grief. The agonizing pressure of the anxious soldier, trapped by an undeniable past. "They were all killed in Operation Silent Thunder," Rivera continued, her voice flat, official. "Ambushed in Afghanistan, someone leaked their position, entire unit wiped out." Rivera paused for emphasis. "Except the records show one member was never recovered, Captain Jessica Mitchell. No body, only blood and equipment." "Funny thing about Captain Mitchell," Rivera said, sitting down heavily. "Her father is Lieutenant General Robert Mitchell, current commander of Fort Benning." Thompson said nothing. She simply waited for the next blow. "Brooks is filing reports about you," Rivera revealed, changing tack. "False reports, insubordination, gross negligence. He's setting you up for a spectacular fall." "I am aware," Thompson finally said. "Are you also aware that he's been accessing classified systems he shouldn't have clearance for, specific files, specific operation codes?" Thompson's head snapped up. This was new. This was the opening. "What kind of systems?" "Personnel records, deployment schedules, information that could get people killed." Rivera slid a manila folder across the desk. Thompson opened it, her pupils dilated. She recognized the classification codes, the search terms. The methodical pattern of the betrayal. "Ma'am," Thompson said, her voice careful, professional, a sudden shift in pitch. "I found white phosphorus grenades in Building 7 this morning, deteriorating." Rivera went absolutely still. That's impossible. We don't store white phosphorus on this base. It's banned. Nevertheless, it's there, Thompson countered, her gaze unwavering. And it's critical. Rivera snatched up her phone. She stepped outside, her voice suddenly low and urgent. Thompson was left alone with the folder. Brooks' searches were systematic, specific units, specific operations, all connected to the ambush 5 years ago. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. A sudden sharp knock. The door swung open. Brooks. He looked around the small office, his sneer returning. Having a nice chat with the Master Sergeant Thompson, trying to file a complaint about me. Thompson slowly closed the folder. I've been wondering about you, Thompson, Brooks continued, moving to intimidate, his shadow falling over her. Nobody that incompetent naturally. It's like you're trying to fail, playing dumb. Why would someone do that? What are you hiding? The door opened again. Rivera and Major Williams, the battalion executive officer. Sergeant Brooks, the major's voice was clipped severe. Building 7 immediately, chemical hazard. Brooks looked back at Thompson, raw suspicion in his eyes, then snapped a salute and left. Specialist Thompson, you identified the white phosphorus, Major Williams stated, his eyes searching hers. In under 2 hours, with no specialized equipment. Yes, sir. Most soldiers wouldn't recognize it if it was labeled with a neon sign. How did you know? I've seen it before, sir, in training. What kind of training? The question hung in the air. Before she could form another evasive answer, the air was torn apart. An alarm, not a drill, 3 long shuddering blasts, the sound of impending catastrophe. The moral weight of her decision settled. The price of truth is often the risk of total exposure, but the price of silence, sometimes, is the life of an innocent. Why did she run toward the smoke when everyone else was running away? 3 long repeating blasts. The emergency evacuation signal, the sound of everything going catastrophically wrong. The major's radio crackled, sharp and metallic. Emergency in Building 7. Chemical hazard detected. EOD requested immediately. All personnel evacuate. Rivera grabbed her gear, her face a mask of grim resolve. Thompson, you're with me. They ran against the flow. Soldiers streaming in the opposite direction. A river of panicked, regulation green. A feeling of cold, absolute resolve settled over Thompson. This was no longer a game of deception. This was her purpose. This was what she had been waiting for. As they approached, they could see the smoke. Not a lot, just a few wisps from the ventilation ducts. But with white phosphorus, a little smoke meant a lot of danger. It meant the thermal runaway had begun. Brooks and his crew stood outside the building, pale and terrified. We moved some crates, Major, Chen stammered, his eyes wide, and it just started sizzling. You moved crates, Rivera demanded, fury barely contained, against a direct order to isolate and await EOD. Thompson was already at the emergency station. She moved with the stunning efficiency of a machine. Pulling on gear, gloves, eye protection, a respirator. Not a full EOD suit, no time. What are you doing? Major Williams shouted, reaching for her arm. Someone needs to contain it before it reaches critical temperature. Thompson's voice was muffled by the respirator, but clear. White phosphorus burns at 5,000 degrees. If it burns through the containment and reaches the adjacent ammunition stock, we'll lose the entire building and everyone within a quarter mile. Wait for EOD, the major ordered, his voice cracking with authority and fear. Sir, with respect, EOD is 15 minutes out. We have maybe 5. She didn't wait for permission. Thompson ran into the building, a small figure swallowed by the black opening of the bay. Disappeared instantly into the smoke. Brooks tried to follow, driven by some chaotic mix of guilt and adrenaline. Rivera stopped him cold. "You've done enough, Sergeant, stay put." Inside, Thompson moved through the smoke with uncanny purpose. She knew the layout. She knew the exact location of the deteriorating rounds. The air was acrid, chemical. It burned the eyes even through the protective gear. Through the respirator, the sound, a sharp, sickening sizzling. The phosphorus was beginning its uncontrolled burn. She reached the makeshift containment unit. It was already melting, the steel buckling under the intense, localized heat. The rounds were glowing, a pale, terrifying orange. 60 seconds, maybe less, before they burned through the floor. She grabbed the suppressant kit. She knew the rules of this kind of fire. No water. Water only exacerbates a WP fire. She found the copper sulfate in the sand. The tools of the bomb tech. Thompson poured the copper sulfate powder directly onto the glowing rounds. A sharp, violent chemical reaction, dampening the heat, creating a shield. Then the sand, thick, heavy, smothering the oxygen, stifling the combustion. The sizzling slowed, a terrible, reluctant hiss, but it did not stop. The fear was gripping, the familiar, cold fear of the bomb tech. But the fear was not a master, it was a tool. It sharpened her focus. She needed to move them. The reinforced steel emergency protocol bucket. She used the long-handled tongs, transferring the rounds one by one. Careful, precise, every ounce of her focus channeled into the tips of the tongs. Sweat ran down her back, pooling in her boots. Her hands were absolutely rock-steady. The kind of steady that comes from worse conditions, from the knowledge of certain death. The last round, placed perfectly, sealed, pressure lock engaged. She grabbed the handle. The weight felt insignificant compared to the psychological load she carried. And she ran, back out of the building. Past the initial evacuation line. To the emergency containment pit, 100 meters from any structure. She lowered the bucket, activated the foam suppressant. Only then did she remove the respirator. A deep, shuddering breath of the cold morning air. The entire compound was watching, 300 soldiers. They had just witnessed a specialist, with supposed no experience, handle a crisis that required a full EOD team. Major Williams reached her first. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a confusion that bordered on awe. "That was, Thompson, how did you?" "Training, sir," Thompson said simply, her voice still rough, trying to control her breathing. "AIT doesn't teach that level of chemical ordnance response," Brooks cut in, his voice flat, accusatory. "I know because I went through the same training." Thompson met his gaze. It was perhaps the first time she had truly talked back. "Maybe you weren't paying attention, Sergeant." Brooks flushed, a dark, angry red replacing his pallor. He opened his mouth to reply, but his words were lost in the sudden, tearing sound of a high-speed convoy arriving. The general had arrived. The moral reflection hit her like a punch. Resilience is not about absorbing pain, but about recognizing the exact moment to transform that absorbed energy into defiant, saving action. A 3-star general arrived in a panic, but his first words were not for the crisis. The motorcade screeched to a halt, black, armored SUVs. The sound of the general's voice cut through the lingering smoke and the nervous chatter. "What the hell is happening at my ammunition point?" Lieutenant General Robert Mitchell stood there. 3 stars gleamed on the collar of his uniform. But it was his face that demanded attention. Weathered, lined, etched with the perpetual exhaustion of command and the invisible weight of a private, profound grief. Major Williams snapped to attention, relaying the facts. "Chemical hazard contained, General. Specialist Thompson identified and neutralized deteriorating white phosphorus rounds." The general's gaze swept over the crowd of soldiers. It was a commander's assessment. Then his eyes stopped. They fixed irrevocably on Thompson. She was covered in dust, chemical suppressant powder and sweat. She raised a weary hand to wipe her cheek. And he saw it. The bruise. Purple-black, stark against the pallor of her jawline. A fresh wound. It looked about 2 days old, the kind of bruise that came from heavy, deliberate impact. General Mitchell went absolutely still. The commander of Fort Benning, the man who had faced down terrorists and hostile fire, frozen. His eyes were fixed on the bruise, then on her eyes, on something deep inside her face that nobody else could see. His mouth opened, closed, a painful swallow. Opened again, the words were a ghost. "You're still alive." The question was barely a whisper, a tearing sound, yet it carried across the frozen formation. The general's voice cracked on the last word. He took a half-step forward, reaching, then stopped himself. This was not the composed, three-star general. This was a father looking at a miracle, a specter, his buried daughter. His eyes were filling with tears he fought desperately to hide. He lost the fight. He turned abruptly, his back to the crowd, and hurried toward his vehicle, his movements jerky, uncontrolled. The entire compound was frozen, an unbelievable silence. Then the whispers began, louder than the alarm had been. Brooks broke the silence first, a desperate, confused sneer. What the hell was that about? Does he know her? Rivera was staring at Thompson, a new, terrible understanding dawning in her eyes. "The general, he recognized you." Thompson's mask was cracking. The careful control was failing. The fear was now one of exposure, not of death. "I need to go," she whispered, starting to move away. "No," Rivera said firmly, placing a hand on her arm. "You need to explain. Who are you really?" "I'm Specialist Thompson, that's all." A weak, practiced lie. "The general doesn't react that way to random specialists," Rivera countered, her voice louder now, demanding the truth. "And you don't handle white phosphorus like someone who learned it in basic training. That badge, Unit 723, you were there, weren't you? Operation Silent Thunder." Thompson stopped dead. She didn't turn around. "You're Captain Jessica Mitchell," Rivera stated, the name ringing out with the finality of a court judgment. It was not a question. The name hung in the air like a detonation. Soldiers who had been dispersing stopped, turned back, compelled by the impossible truth. Brooks laughed, a loud, disbelieving sound of denial. "That's ridiculous. Jessica Mitchell is dead. KIA 5 years ago, I saw the memorial." "No body recovered," Rivera countered, her gaze fixed on Thompson's back. And the general just looked at her like he was seeing his daughter's ghost. Thompson finally turned. The mask was entirely gone, replaced by something raw, agonizing, and profoundly painful, the feeling of being completely broken yet standing firm. "They gave him a flag because they never found my body," she said quietly. The admission stunned everyone into absolute silence. She continued, her voice steady but tired, the exhaustion of 5 years of ghosts finally catching up to her. "They found blood, my equipment, uniform pieces, enough to declare me KIA, but I wasn't dead, not quite." The moral imperative of the moment was clear. When the truth is a weapon, you must choose the moment of its firing with the utmost care, for its recoil is always devastating. She had played the fool for months, but now the game was over. "Where were you?" Rivera asked, her voice softened, gentle. Thompson swallowed, the memory still fragmented, still causing a physical ache. "I don't remember all of it. Fragments, images, pain, a lot of pain." Her hand went unconsciously to her abdomen, where scars told stories she'd never speak aloud. She was broken, yes, but she had endured. "Afghan civilians found me, kept me hidden, kept me alive." She explained the deep, blinding fog of the injury. "My memory, it was gone." For 3 long years she was a blank slate. No name, no home, only an instinct to survive. Brooks's skepticism was a tangible, aggressive force. Amnesia, that's convenient. Head trauma does that, Thompson replied, the professional resurfacing to counter the accusation. Combined with blood loss, infection, and whatever drugs they gave me to keep me quiet while they moved me from village to village, away from the Taliban who were hunting for survivors. It's real. When did you remember? Private Williams asked, his voice soft with genuine awe. Pieces started coming back about 18 months ago. Faces first. My father's face. My unit, the betrayal. Brooks stiffened visibly. The change was instant, fear replacing arrogance. My team died because someone betrayed us, Thompson declared, her gaze locking onto Brooks. Laser focus, the truth finally spoken aloud. Someone leaked our position to the enemy, told them exactly where we'd be and when. It wasn't bad luck. It was a deliberate, calculated betrayal. And you came back to find who? Rivera realized. I came back because I started remembering specific things. Communications that didn't make sense. Files accessed by people who shouldn't have had clearance. Her gaze never left Brooks. She had been ignored for months, but she had used that invisibility as a shield. The kind of things you've been doing, Sergeant. Brooks took a desperate step back, his facade finally crumbling. He was sweating profusely. You're accusing me based on what? Your scrambled memories, your trauma. Based on the fact that you've accessed classified files related to Operation Silent Thunder 17 times in the past 3 months, Thompson stated, her voice quiet, devastatingly clear. Based on the communication log showing encrypted messages sent from your terminal to unknown recipients in Afghanistan. Based on the white phosphorus grenades that mysteriously appeared in Building 7, the same type used in the attack that killed my team, deliberately placed there to either kill me or cover your tracks. The crowd was dead silent. Brooks was hyperventilating. You're insane, he gasped, flailing for control. Am I? Thompson challenged, moving forward slightly. Her stance was aggressive, controlled. Then you won't mind if Major Williams checks your financial records. The $50,000 that appeared in your private account 6 months after my unit was killed, traced from an anonymous offshore source. Brooks lunged. Sudden, violent, desperate. His fist aimed at her face, seeking to inflict the shame and silence he craved. But Thompson moved with a speed that defied the fatigue and the small size of Specialist Thompson. She shifted left, caught his wrist just above the joint, and used his own reckless momentum to flip him. It was pure special operations close-quarters combat training, textbook perfect. The kind they teach only to the chosen few who absolutely must stay alive. Brooks hit the concrete ground with a sickening, audible thud. The air rushed out of him. Before he could recover, military police were already there. Sergeant Brooks, Major Williams' voice was cold, lethal. You're under arrest pending investigation for treason, conspiracy, and financial fraud. Colonel James, the base provost marshal, returned, a tablet in hand showing the undeniable bank records. We've been investigating unusual transactions for weeks. Thompson's name and the specific operation codes just connected all the dots, Sergeant. As the MPs led a defeated, sputtering Brooks away, Thompson swayed. The adrenaline was finally wearing off. Rivera caught her arm, steadying her, her grip one of respect and solidarity. I need to see him, Thompson whispered, her strength completely spent. My father, he needs to know. He knows, Colonel James said gently. He's known something was off about your death for 5 years. He never believed it. He's waiting in his office. Thompson nodded, then looked out at the remaining soldiers. I apologize for the deception. I had to know. I had to find who killed my team. Welcome home, ma'am, one young soldier called out, snapping an unsolicited salute. Thompson's eyes filled with the tears she had been holding back for 5 years, the tears of the determined survivor. Rivera and Colonel James escorted her away from the cheers and the silence. "The bruise on your face," Rivera asked quietly. "Brooks." "2 days ago. He got frustrated when I wouldn't quit," Thompson replied, touching the injury lightly. "It doesn't matter now. I've had worse." The moral reflection. Justice is not a sudden reckoning. It is the patient, invisible work of a soul refusing to be silenced, even when playing the fool. What does a daughter say to a father who buried an empty coffin 5 years ago? Thompson paused at the glass doors of the headquarters building. She could see the long, silent hallway leading directly to her father's office suite. The commander's office, the most powerful room on the base. 5 years, she murmured, a statement of profound guilt. I kept him waiting 5 years. You survived, Rivera said firmly, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. You came home to deliver justice. That's all that matters to a soldier. That's all that matters to a father. Thompson nodded, taking a deep, fortifying breath. She pushed through the glass doors. Each step along the carpeted hallway was the hardest and the easiest she had ever taken. Hard because of the guilt, the crushing weight of the pain she had caused him. Easy because she was finally, undeniably going home. General Robert Mitchell stood with his back to the door, looking out over the parade ground. He was still too still. His shoulders shook slightly, barely perceptible, but a sure sign of the devastation within. Dad. The word was barely a whisper, a soft, familiar sound of childhood and immediate safety. He spun around like he'd been hit by a sniper's round. For a long, shattering moment, they simply stared across the expanse of the office. The general, rigid, disbelieving, the major, fragile home. Then his face crumbled. The strong general facade, the decades of military discipline, all of it collapsed into pure, unadulterated, primal paternal grief. Jessica, he questioned, the name a plea. She didn't speak. She simply nodded, tears now flowing freely, uncontrollable, necessary. He crossed the distance between them in 3 unnatural, desperate strides. He pulled her into an embrace, so tight it hurt her still healing ribs. It was an embrace meant to make up for 5 years of empty nights. He was sobbing, deep, terrible sounds muffled into her shoulder. The 3-star general, commander of the post, crying like the desperate father he was. My baby girl, he kept repeating, my phoenix. Long minutes passed, dissolving years of formalized grief and private guilt. When they finally pulled apart, the general cupped her face in his massive hands. His thumbs were gentle, tentative, tracing the purple-black line of the bruise Brooks had left. Who did this to you? The fierce, protective father overrode the commander instantly. It's being handled, Jessica assured him, managing a shaky smile. Brooks is in custody. He's the one who betrayed my unit. We have undeniable proof now. I'll see him court-martialed for treason, the general vowed, his voice steel wrapped in velvet. Due process, Dad, Jessica said, reminding him of their shared standard. We do this right. My team deserves that much. He finally asked her about the early days of her survival, the truth, the painful details. Bad, Dad, really bad, shrapnel everywhere, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury from the blast. She described the Afghan civilians, the former medical student who did what he could with almost nothing. It was mostly prayer and persistence, Dad, and incredible bravery on their part. They were too afraid to contact the military. The Taliban controlled the region. If they revealed they had an American soldier, the entire village would have been slaughtered. So they kept her hidden. She didn't remember her identity for years, only muscle memory, instinct. Fragments started returning about 18 months ago, she confessed. Your face, the taste of MRE, the sound of my call sign, Phoenix. The general said the name softly, an acknowledgement of the secret identity he'd protected. Your team, have you? I visited their graves last month, Jessica confessed, the guilt rising again. At night, I needed to see them to apologize for surviving when they didn't. Don't you dare apologize for surviving, her father said fiercely, cupping her face again. Your survival is their final victory. You are the living embodiment of the justice they deserved. The moral lesson settled. Survival is not a selfish act. It is a profound, lifelong duty to those who fell, a commitment to carry their memory forward until justice is done. She was declared dead, a specialist, but the salutes were for a major. The wheels of military justice spun with the swift, unforgiving momentum of the evidence. Brooks, Rodriguez, and Chen were in custody. The full, sordid extent of their betrayal, their greed, and their casual disregard for human life was meticulously uncovered. Thompson stood with her father, now formally reinstated and promoted, Major Mitchell. Her career, her identity, her life, all had to be painfully reconstructed. I don't know if I want to be reinstated, she admitted to her father one quiet evening. I've been dead for 5 years, Dad. Maybe that's a chance for a different life, a quieter one. Rivera, now her informal mentor, overheard the remark. Quiet doesn't seem to be your style, Major, especially after taking down an armed conspirator single-handedly in your supply clerk uniform. Jessica's focus narrowed to closure. The one thing she couldn't outrun was the burden of the living. She visited the families of her fallen team members. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, harder than the ambush, harder than the amnesia. She sat in their living rooms, drinking their coffee, and told them the complete, awful truth, assuring them that justice was not only coming, but that it was already served. Staff Sergeant Santos' widow Maria cried, but then smiled through her tears. Maria would be proud that you came back to make it right, Jessica. You survived for a reason. Lieutenant Colonel Crawford's son, about to enlist, shook her hand firmly. My father died saving someone who could come back and finish his mission. Thank you, Major. It was the beginning of her redemption. 2 weeks after the initial arrest, the military trial began, swiftly. Brooks and his accomplices faced charges of treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder. Jessica testified for hours, recounting the ambush, her survival, the bitter truth of the betrayal. She felt a sense of immense, determined pride, mixed with the enduring pain of loss. The verdicts were devastating and final, life without parole for all three. As they were led away, Brooks looked at her, his face a ruin, and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Jessica simply turned away. The apology meant nothing. The silence of the condemned was her only solace. Outside the courthouse, the media waited in a frenzy. Jessica read a prepared statement. "Justice has been served," she read, her voice strong and clear. "But nothing will bring back the 6 heroes who died because of these men's greed. Remember their names, honor their sacrifice. That's all I ask." A month later, she stood before a formation of soldiers at the ammunition point. Hundreds had gathered. They knew the full story now. She wore her proper rank and name tape for the first time since her return. Major Mitchell. "I'm not good at speeches," she began, a small, genuine smile lighting her face. "5 years ago I lost everything, but I gained something too, perspective." She spoke of moral reflection. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's continuing forward despite the fear. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit, but how many hits you can take and keep standing. And I learned that justice might be delayed, but it doesn't have to be denied. Your actions define you. Choose your actions well. The applause was thunderous, a wave of genuine respect washing over her. And in the distance, a visitor had just arrived at the base gate. A visitor from a village halfway across the world, arriving with one name, Phoenix. The moral reflection. The truest measure of a soldier's worth is not the battles won, but the wounds carried and the capacity to turn private pain into public, redeeming action. A visitor from a village halfway across the world arrived with one name, Phoenix. Colonel James appeared at her elbow, carrying his ever-present encrypted phone. "The director called," he said quietly. "Director Sarah Coleman of the Defense Intelligence Agency." Coleman was a ghost in the machine. She had approached Jessica weeks earlier, an offer of off-the-books work. The kind where being officially dead was a distinct advantage. "Tell her I need more time," Jessica said, watching the young soldiers who were now approaching her, eager to shake her hand. The truth was, she didn't know if she could face that shadow world again. The emotional toll was crushing. She had settled into a new life, instructor at the base, part-time intelligence consultant. A calmer, quieter rhythm, a life she deserved. Then her regular phone rang, the CQ desk. "There's someone here to see you, Major. Says it's urgent. She won't give her name, ma'am, but she said to tell you she's from Kandar, from the village." Jessica's heart seemed to stop entirely. The name of the village, the place of her ghost life. She broke several minor speed limits, getting back to the base security office. At the CQ desk stood a young woman, maybe 25. Traditional Afghan dress, but with modern clothes and a backpack underneath. Intelligent eyes, careful posture, quiet fear. "You're Phoenix," the woman said in hesitant, heavily accented English. "Who are you?" Jessica asked, her voice barely a breath. "My name is Amira. My father was the medical student who saved your life. He kept you hidden for 3 years while you healed." Jessica felt her legs go weak, a deep, profound wave of gratitude and sorrow. "He's dead now," Amira continued, her voice catching with quiet, controlled grief. "The Taliban killed him 2 years ago when they discovered he'd helped Americans. But before he died, he told me about you. Told me that if I ever needed help, I should find you. He called you Phoenix." "What do you need?" Jessica asked, already standing up. "Asylum. The Taliban are hunting anyone connected to the Americans. My whole family is dead except for me. I have intelligence. Names of other villagers who helped American soldiers. Information about Taliban operations. But I need protection." Jessica stood up. The decision was instantaneous. The moral cost of saying no was unthinkable. She made calls, pulled strings, used every favor her new rank and her father's history could afford. By dawn, Amira had temporary protected status. She was safe. "There's something else," Amira said, once the immediate danger was past. "My father kept records, photos, documents, proof of other Americans who were helped by villagers. Some might still be alive, prisoners or maybe living in remote areas with amnesia like you had." Amira pulled out a small, worn leather scroll. Jessica opened it. Names, locations, encrypted dates. At least 3 American soldiers, still lost, still ghosts. Jessica thought of their families, still facing the same hell her father had endured for 5 years. "I need those records," Jessica said. "I'll give them to you," Amira agreed. "But I want something in return. I want to serve. I want to join the American military. I want to honor my father by protecting others the way he protected you." Jessica smiled, a genuine, powerful expression of hopeful duty. "That," she said, "can absolutely be arranged." The moral imperative was now a living, breathing entity. The debt of survival is repaid not with words, but with the rescue of others. Your redemption is tied directly to theirs. The team approached the compound, but this was where the darkness had swallowed her whole once before. Could she send others into that abyss? Her encrypted phone rang. "Coleman." "We have a problem, Major Mitchell," the DIA director said. "One of the names Amira gave us. The possible American survivors. We just got signal intelligence that suggests one of them is alive and being moved to Pakistan for sale to the highest bidder." 48 hours, maybe less. A terrifying hard deadline. I can't deploy officially. I'm not operational anymore, Jessica admitted. The risk was too high. No, but you could advise. Guide the team that does deploy. Your experience in that exact region is invaluable. Your call sign is on the brief, Phoenix. Jessica looked at Amira, who was sitting quietly, absorbing the terror and urgency. Take me with you, Amira urged. I know the villages, the people, the culture. I know the military side. Together we might save lives. Like my father saved yours, Jessica affirmed. Then let's get to work. She embraced the role of Phoenix, advisor, operative, conscience. She pored over intelligence with Coleman's analysts, identifying holding locations, planning contingencies. She felt the cold fear, the echo of her own ambush, but she channeled it. Fear became focus. 47 hours later, Jessica stood in the Tactical Operations Center, TOC. Drone footage swam across the screens. The team was approaching a compound in eastern Afghanistan. Her encrypted satellite phone connected her directly to the team leader. Phoenix, this is Raptor 1. We're in position, perimeter secure. Copy Raptor. Remember, they might have moved him. Trust your instincts. Hold the line, not the body count. For 10 agonizing minutes, Jessica barely breathed. She watched the familiar walls, the familiar darkness, remembering another compound, another team, another mission that had ended in fire. Then Phoenix, we have him. Confirmed contact, we have an American citizen. Webb is secure. Jessica let out the breath she'd been holding for 5 years, a deep, seismic shudder of relief. Her mission, the one she'd barely dared to believe in, complete. The rescued soldier, a former Marine named Webb, was safe. She felt a profound, satisfying sense of hopeful duty fulfilled. Amira watched, tears streaming down her face. My father would be proud. He is, Jessica said simply. The moral reflection. The greatest victory is not over the enemy, but over the trauma that seeks to keep you frozen in the past, preventing you from saving the future. The final lesson plan was about rules of engagement, but what did that really mean when the fight was internal? Jessica stood before her class of junior officers, Major Mitchell. She set the official lesson plan aside. The dry, procedural language felt suddenly thin, inadequate. Change of plans, she announced. Today we're talking about moral courage. She told them Amira's story. About the medical student who risked, and lost, his life to save an American soldier. She spoke of villages that protected the wounded, ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Leadership isn't just about giving orders, she said, walking toward the window. It's about being worthy of the sacrifice others make for you. It's about paying that debt forward. It's about choosing what is right over what is easy every single time, every minute, every bullet. A hand went up in the back row, a young lieutenant, serious and reflective. Ma'am, how do you keep making those choices when you've already lost so much, when the cost is so high? Jessica paused. She thought about the graves, about the 5 years lost to the fog of war, about the bruise on her face, a physical reminder of the fight she'd won. Because the alternative is letting the traitors and the darkness win. It's letting their actions define your own. I survived for a reason, and that reason is justice and protection for those who can't fight for themselves. That is what we owe our team, the living and the dead. Amira was enrolled in military preparatory school. Webb was recovering. Jessica secured her citizenship, her future, and a chance to honor her father's sacrifice. The truth of her own journey, from the ambush to the amnesia to the investigation, the revelation and the ongoing mission, was now a public testament to resilience. She continued her work, balancing the public life of a major and instructor with the shadow work for Coleman. Off-the-books intelligence, using her unique knowledge to prevent future betrayals. She was the phoenix, rising again and again, carrying the flames of justice wherever the darkness tried to take hold. Her encrypted phone rang. "Coleman, we have another situation," the director began. Jessica cut her off. "Send me the details, I'll be ready." That was her purpose, her reason for surviving. As she left the classroom, turning off the lights, her reflection caught in the window. For a moment, she saw not just Major Mitchell, but the faint, fleeting image of her team standing behind her. Watching, approving. "Mission continues," she said softly. The moral reflection, final and poetic, settled over the darkening landscape. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.